Hello everybody, Ranger Mark Mello with the Blackstone River Valley National Historical Park, welcoming you to our 12th Ranger Chat. We talk so much about the Blackstone River, but very rarely talk about the man whose namesake the river is, the Reverend William Blackstone. Coming to the New World from England, he originally was the first settler in what today we call Boston, eventually selling his farm there, which was on Beacon Hill, in that area, and moving to what today is Cumberland, Rhode Island, on a farm which he named Study Hill. And Blackstone's story is a fascinating one in and of itself, but the story of what happened to his body after he died is almost even more fascinating than the life that he lived. And so, for more on that story, we're going to join Ranger Kevin Kleiberg. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a throwback here. This is a segment from an Along the Blackstone episode. But we're going to join Ranger Kevin as he explains a little bit more about what happened to Reverend Blackstone's body.
While talking about the contributions made by the people of the Blackstone Valley to the Second World War, we would be remiss to overlook those made by the namesake of the valley, the Reverend William Blackstone himself. And that might seem a little bit peculiar, seeing as he died about 250 years before the war began, but like many an unsung hero, the Reverend Blackstone literally gave his all to the war effort. Now I'm standing here in the William Blackstone Memorial Park, right next to a monument that reads in part, "The Grave of the Reverend William Blackstone." But this stone is lying because Reverend Blackstone isn't buried here. In fact, we don't know where he is buried, and if anyone does know, they're not saying. Now, the Reverend Blackstone was the first English settler in this region, leaving Boston in 1635 and looking for a new place to live. And he arrived in this area, which he named Study Hill, which is now the section of Lonsdale in the town of Cumberland, Rhode Island. And he lived here for about 40 years in what was then a pastoral wilderness, farming and preaching, as well as growing his famous roses and apples. When he died here in 1675, he was buried by his friends along the banks of the river that now bears his name. Blackstone's slumber remained undisturbed for about another 200 years, until in 1886 when the Lonsdale Company decided that they were going to build a new mill here along the banks of the Blackstone River. And this was to be the Ann and Hope Mill, this monstrous 500-foot-long, 4-story brick building that was going to be put right at the base of Study Hill. Now, in order to build it, they were going to have to come in here and flatten out the base of the hill, including digging up William Blackstone's grave. Well, the people of Cumberland decided this was a little bit too much for their founding father, and so they carefully disinterred him. They reburied William Blackstone in about the same spot and put the monument over the top. Now, Blackstone was left again to his own rest for about 60 more years. And then in 1944, during the middle of the war, the Ann and Hope Mill was now being used as a repair facility by the Navy to fix up heavy equipment. And they realized they needed to bring in a new train line so they could ship things up from Providence and Quonset Point right here to the mill. And that new rail was going to go right over the gravesite of William Blackstone. Once again, William Blackstone was going to have to be moved for the cause of progress. At this point, wiser minds prevailed. They realized, well, this is the second time we've had to move this man in less than 60 years. Maybe this is a bit of a high-traffic area, not the best spot for him to be buried. So they decided they would pick up the monument, redig William Blackstone up, and rebury him, this time behind the mill over on Broad Street, where they felt that more people would be able to see the monument. Well, this is where the story gets a little bit confusing, which is often the case when we're dealing with William Blackstone. After they moved the monument, either he was dug up right at that point, or, as some say, it was a little bit after the war when a backhoe came along and accidentally dug up what was left of the box. Well, either way, William Blackstone's remains were picked up and put aside for later reburial. But remember, there's a war on and people had better priorities. And so it was a few years after the war, when they moved the monument over to Broad Street, they decided to rebury William Blackstone. Well, unfortunately, no one could find his earthly remains. Now, some folks tell a story about how they were last seen on a shelf in the manager's office over here in the Ann and Hope Mill. Another story talks about them being seen in a barn somewhere here in Rhode Island. But either way, the remains of William Blackstone, the sage of the wilderness, were gone for good. The mystery remains unsolved to this day. And in 1997, when this new park was created, they moved the monument to this new site, where it continues to falsely proclaim that it is the site of the grave of the Reverend William Blackstone, pioneer, botanist, preacher, and MIA since 1944.
As unsettled in death as he was in life. A really interesting story, and if anybody knows where Reverend Blackstone's body is, we'd love to know, so do share if you have any ideas of where his body is currently at rest. With that being said, thank you everybody for joining us. Really exciting news. We're beginning to increase access at Roger Williams National Memorial, so we will be out doing an outdoor visitor center Thursdays through Sundays. So if you're in the area and you want to learn more about Roger Williams, be sure to check that out. And there'll be more coming on when the Rangers will return to the Blackstone Valley. So exciting things. But I want you to know that we are going to continue this series for the weeks upcoming. So still, if you have any ideas of things that you'd like us to talk about, leave those down in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you out there along the Blackstone really soon.